Following video is brought to you by the Boston Sports Entertainment Network. Please consider liking and subscribing for more Boston sports content.
I got the Boston Celtics going to the final.
I got them winning without.
It's time to represent your city. Put your hands up. Cali, you know we do it for Boston. Hey, ain't nobody gonna like Boston. Yeah, hey, can't nobody do it like Boston. Where the legends get made, where the banners get raised, right? Life's big stage. Boston. All the fire we bring in a city full of rings. It's a beautiful thing out in Boston. And you ain't hard like that. You don't put it on the line with your squad like that. That's right, Boston. All we do is win like cigars in the gym, and we at it again. I say, Beantown, what's up? What's up? 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 Feel the energy shift, now we jumping at the gym. Represent, showing out how we ball above the rim. Larry Legend, 86, to the truth in 08. Cement your name with the all-time greats. To banner 18 in the Raptors. Celtic green, only green that matters. It's about that time. Ain't another city that's louder than mine. Always gonna shine with the game on the line. What you think was gonna happen, man? That's how we do it in Boston. Ain't nobody gonna like Boston. Yeah, yeah. Can't nobody do it like Boston.
All right. Welcome into this episode of the Dynasty Proud podcast. It's our first show of the new year, 2025. It's a little late for this to be our first show for this year, but it is what it is. As always, I am here. I'm Ryan. I am at 19_loading on Twitter. Alex, my usual co-host, is unable to make it today for the show, but he'll be back with us very soon. But in the interest of kind of keeping us a little bit more consistent, we have added a new member to the show, as you can clearly see here. We have my guy, Aullie. He is at BYU Fan A on Twitter. Yes, he's a BYU fan, but he's also a Boston sports fan. So Aullie, it's great to have you on, and hopefully you'll be able to help us kind of keep up with having a show, ideally every week, with at least two of us on if we can. And Alex and I have just kind of had crazy different schedules, so we've only been able to do a show like every other week, and we want to make sure we step it up. But we're glad to have you on board.
Awesome, yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be part of this. And like you said, I'm Aullie. I am BYU fan, but I'm also a huge Celtics fan. My dad grew up in Boston, and we lived out there when I was growing up. So I bleed green. So I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about the season. And hopefully this podcast leads into another banner 19. So it'll be a good time.
Yeah, Alex and I joked at the beginning of the season, I should probably lock down 20 loading for next year, just in case. But the way things are going right now, I don't know. Maybe I'll hold off on that. But
For sure.
So before we get into it, I did want to mention too. I want to make sure I plug the giveaway I have going on my page right now. We're giving away an awesome Celtics jacket. The post is pinned on my profile. Go check it out if you haven't already. Make sure you get entered in that. But so I think I wanted to start out because we haven't done a podcast in a little while. I wanted to start out with the Celtics Thunder game from last week. So they were coming off of 3 straight wins against Toronto, Minnesota, Houston. Things were kind of looking up after what had been sort of an up and down couple of weeks. They went into halftime in that game with a lead, and then they came out in the second half, and the offense was just abysmal. They scored 27 points. No one could hit a shot. Tatum finished the game at a -12. Kristaps was -17. They didn't have a single player who finished the game with a positive plus-minus, and the closest was Horford at a -1. But even with all the issues they had almost 3 20-point scorers in Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis, who finished with 19. But they were just 9 of 46 from 3. So did you feel like this was more about the Celtics offense or the Thunder's defense, or do you think it's a combination of the two, or where do you stand?
I feel like it's a combination of the two. I mean, I feel like since we've had Joe Mazzulla, like, love him, great coach, I'm a big fan. He is a live or die by the 3 kind of guy. He's launching 40 plus shots from the arc, beyond the arc every game. And so I think it was one of those games where, like, stuff wasn't falling. And from watching, I would say it was more our offense, because I feel like there were some threes and some shots that I was like, I wouldn't have taken that personally, but there were a lot of, I felt like pretty good looks, especially towards the end as like we tried to make that mini run to bring it back. It just felt like we were almost in our own heads, and we were just taking the first shot available, and it might not even have been the best shot, but they just couldn't fall. And it, like you said, like it wasn't the worst game of the season either, because we had Tatum at 26 points, Brown at 21, Porzingis at 19, and then you even had White at 11. So we had four guys in double figures. But it almost seems that we get Porzingis out there recently, and for some reason we just like can't remember how to work with him as well as we did. Like, you'll watch, if you compare like the Oklahoma City game, and then you compare it to even like right before the playoffs last year with Porzingis, it almost just looks like it's like kind of rickety, and people don't know exactly how to work with each other anymore.
Yeah. So, and I was just looking this up because I wanted to have the numbers right, but I know the Thunder only scored 105 points in that game, but it looked so much worse than that. Like,
yes,
they were running circles around Porzingis in particular, because like I said, he was a minus 17 for the game. That can't happen in a game like that. That is, a matchup of like two marquee teams in the league, maybe a finals preview. That just cannot happen. And I know he's been missing games. He's been in and out of the lineup. It's probably hard when your entire team barely gets to play together with all the guys they've had in and out of the lineup all over the place. But for me, this game of all the recent ones, which I know we'll get into some of these other games, specifically the one from last night, it's probably the least concerning one in hindsight, just because it is the Thunder. They have a historically good defense. They're a great team. But I do still have concerns, and it sets the foundation for these other games that have happened recently, which we'll obviously get into. Kind of leads me into the Nuggets game, which was good. So following that game, they go into Denver, who admittedly did not have Jokic due to an illness. The Celtics were missing Derek White, and they come away with a pretty convincing win. And it was almost the exact opposite of the Thunder game, because they shot a lot less threes, which is funny because Michael Malone before that game was adamant that the Celtics are going to shoot 50 threes a game. Like he says, like they are going to get 50 shots up from three, and they only shot 35, which I thought was pretty entertaining. I don't know if that was deliberate just to throw him off the scent or whatever, just to do something counter to what he thinks they're going to do. I'm really not sure. It might have just been how the matchups played out. Tatum was a plus 23 in this one. And that was despite him being 1 of 9 from 3. So outside of Tatum, I checked the numbers on this. The team as a whole only shot 26 threes in that game, and they made 11 of them, which is over 42%, which helps a ton. And Drew Holiday, Sam Hauser, they both hit really timely shots in this one. It felt like every time you needed it, they got a bucket. Specifically, Hauser had 9 points, all from 3. Drew had 19, which is, a big contribution from him, especially with Derek out of the lineup. How do you feel about that game, and what are your just kind of general thoughts on how that one went?
That was a great game, and I just looked because I wanted to remember, but Porzingis was 50% from the floor. I think not having Jokic obviously helps because we had a bigger man down there. He was 50%, from 2. But it was also one of those games where I liked it because it feels like Drew he's been kind of a roller coaster to watch the last couple weeks. And I by no means am saying like I'm not a Drew guy, or I don't think he's good, but he's definitely had some slumps recently. So it's nice to see him come out, because we had, if I remember right, this kind of jumping but a little bit, but yesterday with the Pacers, I'm pretty sure he was like a negative, he was in like the 20s, I think. Negative 18, excuse me. But it was nice to see him in that Denver game kind of get back to what we've seen him do. And it was nice to see those threes falling, especially when Tatum couldn't get it to go. Because I feel like sometimes when Tatum can't get to go and he kind of lags a little bit, the whole offense just kind of almost stops taking the shots too, and then they just try to make something else. And it was a great example of like team ball rather than like, hey, we're just gonna keep feeding it to one person. It's like, it's not going great right there. Let's get someone else on the arc and see what happens. But I feel like there's a lot that we can build off of with that. Even after the loss last night, there's still a lot that we can go off of with that being the Nuggets are still very much a contender team, in my opinion, coming out of the West. Like, they still have pieces that can make a run. And so I think that we can really keep that chemistry building after that game, and try to take that and be like, hey, like, everyone has ups and downs. Like, we can't let that beat us, because if we do, we're going to end up, bottom of the East, because we're just not trying anymore.
Yeah, and it definitely felt that way. And I'm with you on Drew, because it's a sign that even though it's been, like you said, kind of a roller coaster with him recently, it's a sign that it's still in there. He's not completely washed. Like, he's going to have those good nights. They might not be as consistent as you want them to be, but that's the advantage that the Celtics have with him being, their seventh, eighth guy realistically. Like, he's not their number one option. And I guess, he's probably higher than that on the list, but at his worst, that's what he is, and I think that's a big advantage. And the other thing that I felt like was encouraging was with Jokic being out, like, they didn't just quit. They didn't say, well, this game doesn't matter anymore, whatever. Let's play down to the competition and let it get away from them. And it turned out to be, like I said, kind of a convincing win, which was really encouraging. The other thing that I wrote down on this one was, so Jaylen Brown had just 14 points, but he also had 8 rebounds and 8 assists. And I saw a lot of Nuggets fans and like just Russell Westbrook fans, like on Twitter after the game, who were kind of flexing, saying they're like, "Oh, Russ shut Jaylen down. Like, he couldn't do anything on him. He called for a switch every single time." And my response to that would just be, did you see what happened when they did get a switch? Because did you see Jamal Murray attempting to guard Jaylen Brown? Because he might as well have not been there, in my opinion. Jaylen, like, more than once, basically bullied Murray into the paint and put up a mid-range or a hook shot over him and made him look super soft in the paint, which was awesome. So yes, like, Russ had a great game on defense, but individual defense by one guard is not going to win you a game. And I would point to the fact that he also had 8 turnovers and was a -10 in that game. So for all the Russ stands out there, he's, like, obviously still a good player. He's not washed up by any means. But first of all, he had a complete fluke performance from 3. He made 4 threes, which he never does. He couldn't hold on to the ball. And he ended up, like I said, as a -10. So he did hurt them more than he helped. He had 26 points, but like I said, with 4 threes, that sort of seems inflated. I don't know. And people were sort of getting on Jaylen for that performance with only having 14 points, but, like, these guys aren't going to score 30 every night. That's my thing. Like,
no,
that was me.
And the thing, okay, so this might be a hot take, but, like, the more, like, throughout the season, as I've been watching, some of our best statement wins are like the big punches. Jaylen really he's been around 20 points, I'd say like 15 to 20 points, but he has a well-rounded, like, he's above 5 rebounds, upwards of 5 or 6 assists. Like, he's doing more around the court, which I think is what we want. Like, we want all our guys, like, you see it all the time. Like, there'll be games where we'll bomb and Tatum will have close to 30 points, but he hasn't done much on rebounds or assists. And when both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are playing that team ball, it's amazing. And all these people will, like, talk like, oh, like, they got shut down, they only scored this, and then it's like you're ignoring at least 3 other categories of the stats that show that they were completely terrorizing you guys all night. They just only ended up with 15 or 16 points. But they had, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 blocks, something like that. And so I'm a huge fan of getting those well-rounded, almost box score, for lack of a better term, just because that's when I see the Celtics thrive the most, and that's what we saw last year in the playoffs. Was everyone just kind of played for each other, and so no one really cared who the top dog was that game, who was scoring the most points. It was all about, like, okay, who has the hot hand right now? Like, how can I fit into the scheme to make sure we win? And I think that the more we get back to that as the season goes on, I think that it'll set us up well for another run at a title.
Yeah, and getting back to what you said about like the well-roundedness for Tatum, Brown, really everybody. Like I said before, Tatum, like in that particular game against the Nuggets, he's a plus 23, despite shooting so poorly. So it goes to show you how much more he does that doesn't show up on the stat sheet in other areas. Yes. Where like he's shutting guys down on defense, he's getting steals, he's blocking shots, he's playing passing lanes, he's doing everything that he makes the correct play almost every time. And that's sort of how I feel about Derek White, who they didn't have in this game against the Nuggets. But it's so infrequent that he makes a play that you say, "What are you doing?" Yes. And that's what I do love about this particular team. And I know I'm probably being more positive than I intended to be in talking about things in general, the state of the team. But we'll get into last night in a second. But the other thing, I also remember hearing Stan Van Gundy say in this game on the broadcast, because I live out of Market. I live in Atlanta, so I can't watch the local broadcast if it's on a national broadcast. Yep. So I had to watch the national one. And Stan Van Gundy said in that game that the Nuggets love playing Dario Saric because he allows them to play basically the same way as they do with Jokic out there. And like, all I could do was laugh at that. I'm like, are we being serious? Like, Dario Saric is not anywhere near the player that Nikola Jokic is. But I really don't know why he said that. Sometimes things he says just baffle me, but he's not terrible at his job. Just I don't know where that one was coming from.
For sure.
So anyway, last night, Celtics Kings. This was a home game, the beginning of a homestand. First of all, I'd like to point out, most importantly, Devin Carter, former Providence Friar, had 11 points, 4 rebounds, and a very nice assist to a teammate in the corner. And of course, it's me who actually hit that shot, but I just had to get that out of the way. Go Friars, good for him. But for the Celtics, I'm speechless. Like, this was another awful second half, similar to OKC. They got run out of the building, especially in the fourth quarter. They were outscored 38-21 in the fourth. They got booed multiple times, and in my opinion, it was completely justified. They just looked like they didn't care at all. Like, what did you see in this game?
So I was a little worried, with Fox out, just because we've had over the past couple of seasons. If we have people that, like, if we are playing, a team and one of their main guys is out, like you said, with the Nuggets game, we didn't do this. We didn't play down to a level, but it felt like in this game, we just didn't care. We just seemed kind of careless, and almost like our mind was somewhere else. And there was, if you look, we shot 41 threes, and we had 26% from beyond the arc. And our free throws were, 81, which isn't terrible, but we're missing free throws in the fourth quarter, and it's just like, do you guys even want to win? Like, are you trying? And like, you look at, this is one of those games where, like, not saying that this is on anybody, but like, you have Jaylen Brown, and he had 5 assists, we had like 1 rebound, 28 points. We have one guy that's cooking almost all night. And then we have Porzingis at 22 points, Tatum at 15. Everyone else is single digits. We could not get people involved well. And then we had another one of a little more rough game just from Drew from the plus minus side, where it just seemed like we could not stop like what was happening when we had like one of our main five on the floor. I think it was just like frustrating as a fan because I've seen us beat teams better than this, respectfully, to the Kings, time and time again. And so to see this and, at home, it's like, what are you guys doing? Like, there's not even like the away crowd, like making any noise, like making big splashes or anything. It's just, we are choking at home, and it's not even like, oh, we lost, by a last second shot. Like, we lost by 17 points. It is just frustrating to me.
No, I'm with you 100%. And there was one particular defensive possession to me that was kind of telling of the way this game was going. And I'll preface this by saying Jaylen Brown is like my favorite player on the team. Like, I love Jaylen Brown. But this one play, he just completely fell asleep. He allowed his man to spring wide open for a 3-point attempt. There was either a miscommunication on who was supposed to have him or what. But luckily, he misses the shot. But then it was a long rebound that goes all the way out back to the 3-point line that gets picked up by Sabonis, who grabbed it and hit the second chance three. And I was checking the play just to make sure I had the right moment. Before all that happened, it was 84-79 Sacramento. So when all this happened, Sabonis hits that three, gets him up to 23 points for the game. And Jaylen and Drew both literally just like stared at him while he shot it. And this is the fourth quarter of a 5-point game at home.
Yep.
Like, it's completely inexcusable. It's inexplicable. I don't understand like the logic behind that. If you're on the road, right, and you go down 10 with 2 minutes left in the fourth, like, okay, fine. I understand in an 82-game season, a grind like that, like I don't love it, but I understand packing it in and maybe not giving 100%. But in this game, they're at home, they're down 5, and they just quit. They just didn't feel like they wanted to be there. And Sabonis had it going, and they basically just said, let's live to fight another day and move on with our lives. And I detest that. Like, I refuse to believe that it's good for a team to just give up. Because in that moment, it's still a game. It's not over. One stop, one score. It's a one possession game. Yep. And the thing for me is I'm just a believer in the fact that, and this is going to sound obvious, but the effort that you put in directly reflects the results that you're going to get in return. So, like, if this team just wants to coast through the regular season, they're going to hurt themselves in the long run, because they're 6.5 games back of Cleveland in the conference right now. The 1 seed is going to be an uphill battle, and Cleveland's not slowing down. They're 33-4. And the Celtics now have almost twice as many losses at home this year as they did all of last year. They're at 7 right now. They had 4 all of last year, and it's January. So the simple fact of the matter to me is that the Celtics team, while still a good team, obviously they're the 2nd seed in the East, they're not as good as last year, and that's just the fact. Like I said, they're still the 2nd seed in the East. They're not a terrible team.
For sure.
The only team I could see catching them really for the 2nd seed would be the Bucks, just because they started off so terribly, but they're really kind of catching on now. So at worst, you're finishing like 3rd or 4th if the Knicks maybe get it in gear and go on a big run, but that would be like a disaster if you finish 4th. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, do you feel like all right, I guess the way I should frame this is going back to so Alex texted us a little earlier or was in our group earlier, just kind of giving a take. And he mentioned this is kind of the question or the statement that he wanted to present to us. He thinks the Celtics at this point are kind of just bored going through the motions in the grind of an 82-game season, like we said, and that they're going to lock it in for the playoffs and they'll be fine. And I guess the question from that is, do you agree with him, or do you have any legitimate concerns for this team?
So like I'm a big believer in, the whole squad and Missoula. Am I still a little nervous? Yeah, like I feel like we played contenders, and we're so up and down with, like, we either play and we knock the socks off and we have a great game, or we get bent a little bit. And most of it is by our own doing. It's not even like we're getting outplayed respectfully from like their side. It's like we give up or we're not making the right decisions. And it's just like, it almost feels a little bit to me like we won the title last year. It's been a grind, like it's been years since we won. We're in the finals, lost. We're in the Eastern Conference Finals again, lost to the Heat, and then we come back, have this huge run. We win the title, and it almost feels like all the energy just like over the summer, you had all the issues with everyone trying to talk about how Jaylen Brown didn't make the Olympic team, and then Tatum didn't get played in the Olympics. And I'm sitting there thinking we are going to come out and steamroll people. The energy in the offseason, I was like, we're going, we're going high 60s for wins this year. We're cooking. And then we get to this point, and it almost feels like the 2022 season before Jaylen Brown, tweeted energy shifting, went on that crazy run, where it was just so up and down, and it feels like we just don't want it as much anymore. It feels like they got the taste for it and almost don't. While not saying that they don't want it, because I guarantee they probably all want to win another one, but the fire to win your second compared to your first, I feel like is a lot different, and they just seem to lack a little bit of that extra level to push us to that back-to-back after they won. That's just my own personal opinion.
Yeah, and sort of like you said, when you are the defending champions, this has been talked about a lot, you have a target on your back, and everybody's going to get up for you that night. They're going to come in. This is their Super Bowl every time they play you. They're like, this is a game that every single team has circled on the calendar. So it takes more effort to win the second one than it does the first. And I don't, like you said, I really don't doubt that they want to win. I don't have any concerns about that. But I think it takes a certain level of urgency to say, okay, yes, we won, but everybody's gunning for us now. So we have to put our foot on their throat and not let them have it, because if we don't, they're going to come and take it from us.
Yes.
And going back to what Alex said, I agree with the statement that they probably will lock in for the playoffs and figure it out. But my overarching concern would be that even with that being the case, it's clear to me that their version of quote unquote locked in just might not be as good as it was last year. And that's where I worry a little bit.
Yes. And I 100% agree. We had a game earlier on with Cleveland, and it was a pretty good, game. And I feel like they almost are letting the pressure of being that champion and trying to get that back. They're letting it get to them a little bit. And at the first stumbling block, it feels like in a game, not even just at one game, but in a game, they'll have they'll stumble a little bit, and it takes them so long to get back on their feet that then they're, like you said, with the game against the Kings, Sabonis, he has that three. It's a tight game right there, and it feels like they had they had an okay defensive possession, then he shoots a three, and then we were just completely done. It was there's no energy anymore in the Celtics, corner, and so it just felt like we can't seem to get ourselves over challenges mid-game. We're last year, I feel like if we could go down 20 points in the middle of a game, and I'd be we're probably going to claw our way back. Even if we lose, it's going to be by 7 points, and it's because the free throws at the end that throw everything off. It's not a true 7-point game. Where now we get down 12 to 13, in the middle of a game, third quarter-ish, and I'm are we going to be able to pull this off, or do we have the grit, I guess would be the word I would use, to crawl back like we used to be able to do, or are we just going to kind of throw our hands up and be I guess this is it?
Yeah. And so that's sort of talking about that game kind of leads me into the next thing that I wanted to mention. which is the Celtics local broadcast. So like I said, I am not based in Boston, so I don't have the option to sometimes I don't have the option to watch the local broadcast, but when they're not on national TV, I get the NBC Sports Boston feed through League Pass. And this is just an itch that I have to scratch. Brian Scalabrine has been really getting on my nerves recently. And it's probably because the team is losing games that it shouldn't be losing. So I'm more frustrated with that than anything else. And I'll be the first to admit that. But last night in particular, during the fourth quarter and toward the end of the game, the whole narrative was like, well, the Kings just played really well and they deserve all the credit. And it was a really impressive game for them and blah, 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 blah. And my thing is, okay, that may all be true. Sure. The Kings played well. Domantas Sabonis was ridiculous. He had like 28 rebounds, whatever. But the Celtics deserve criticism for how they handled the end of this game. They quit. Yes. They gave up, and they deserve to be called out for it. And I get that Scal has to be around these guys all the time, around the facility, in the building, on road trips with them. And like, you don't want to have it turn into like a Dennis Eckersley, David Price thing. But it's not unfair to say something negative if it's the truth. My guy, Andy Hart on WEI, who I listen to pretty frequently, he says this all the time. The truth is never mean. Just tell it like it is. Like, I'm tired of the rainbows and unicorns broadcast. And there were people on Twitter like responding to me last night when I sort of brought this up, and they're like, well, do you just want them to like be negative the whole time? I'm like, no, I just want them to tell me what they're seeing. Like use your eyes. Like it's so frustrating. I can't stand it.
No, I
now I've got that on my chest. I just had to rant on that.
You're good. I also live out of market. I'm currently at school in Utah. So I get the national games, but then the ones that I don't, I league pass it, with the boys back at NBC Sports Boston. And I feel like I 100% see where you're coming from and agree. I feel like too often now in like just in today's world, we're too scared to give even constructive criticism to come across, rude or offend or things like that. And I think especially when it comes to basketball, like, I'd rather the guy be like, that was not a great shot, or like they need to fix this if they want to make a run. Like, as a fan, I appreciate that, because if I'm a fan and I'm listening to broadcasts and these guys that are supposed to, know ball at a high level, have played ball, and they're like, oh, it's fine, like everything, then I'm like, am I crazy for thinking that we need to make some changes? Like, do I not understand what's happening? And then you get there is a balance, like you kind of talked about, where you don't, like, people are questioning, no, you don't want them to be negative all the time and just completely crap on the team every chance they get. But you also want them to be real and be like, they really struggled with their getting back in transition, or with like having that energy at the end of the fourth to like keep playing through like they're in the first quarter, and so it's just, I think there just needs to be a balance. And I feel like sometimes on the NBC Sports Boston, you have, Scal is just more, he likes to give props out to everybody, and he was a player, so I think he likes to make sure everyone feels heard. But sometimes it's like, also, like, you got criticism as a player probably, and it made you better. Like, you can still use that and not be a douche, but you can use that criticism to be like, I see this and I think this needs to change. And especially at someone at that high of a level in the broadcast and around the team that much, maybe the team like takes notice and is like, maybe we look into something. Maybe we look at trying to make changes.
Yeah. And like you said, like, I'm not asking for anything ridiculous. I feel like I'm just asking for like honesty and truth. Like, let's be real about what we're seeing in front of us. That's all I really want. Also, the weird thing at the beginning of that game was the camera angle where they had it like locked on the ball handler and it was zoomed all the way in, so you couldn't even see the basket or like any of the rest of the team or the floor. Like, that was awful. I don't know what
it was like 2K. It was like
2K. No, I understand. It looked like it was like player locked. I was like, what is this? Like, I did not enjoy that at all. So anyway, last thing we should touch on is just kind of the upcoming games. I do see a chance for the Celtics to kind of get right this week. They've got 4 games in, I think, 7 days between Sunday to Saturday. So I'd imagine it's going to be tough to go 4-0, but I'd like to see them lose only 1 at most. Either way, so they've got New Orleans, who they completely stink, but I would bet the house on a CJ McCollum over for his point total in that one, based on the recent games for the Celtics and for CJ McCollum, who's been going off. Then they've got the Raptors, who are like really competitive but beatable. The Magic have just gotten Paolo back, and the Hawks, who, you know, they'll give you a game if you let them, but again, that should be a winnable game.
For sure.
How do you feel about the rest of this homestand coming up?
You know, I feel good. I feel like the biggest out of those next 4, if me personally, is the Magic. I feel like they've had our number for the last, I feel like, 2 seasons. Like if you remember back, I'm pretty sure it was last season during the in-season tournament, it was like our first round game, like after making the cuts, you know, through, and we lost to the Magic, and they've very similar, almost like college ball, if that makes sense. They're a little more fast paced, and just like they have so much energy, and they just kind of let it out, and they just kind of go there. And so I feel like sometimes the Celtics, we get trapped by that kind of atmosphere or that kind of team, because we are very set pieces. We like to control the speed of the game. We like to play, make sure we dictate the pace. And the Magic just kind of don't care. They're like, we're going to play however we want. So like, either you're going to figure it out, or like we're going to take it. So I think that they, like you said, it'll be hard to go 4-0. But I think if genuinely they can beat the Magic, I think we'd have a shot at 4-0 if they can figure out some of the other things we've talked about earlier. But Magic is probably the one I have the star next to, of like, that one is probably going to be our biggest what if.
Yeah, so the Magic are a funny team because, as you mentioned, like going back a few years, they've just been such a bad matchup for the Celtics for whatever reason. And I don't know if it's size, length, what it is, but no matter who they've had, like they just have had the Celtics number at different times. And Paolo is a really nice player who he's just coming back from injury. So, you know, he may have some ups and downs with that, but he still looks really good in his first game back, which I think was last night. The game that I would look at as possibly, going back to the Magic, I meant to mention too, Jamal Mosley, honestly, I think should be coach of the year. Like with what he's doing with the teams, with the roster that he has, with guys in and out of the lineup, with Franz going down, Paolo going down, he's going out there with like Jalen Suggs and Anthony Black and Goga Bitadze, and they're beating everybody. And it's like, how are they? I mean, you know, they're not a title contender. I don't want to misconstrue this as saying that I think that they're a threat to anybody in the East. And they're not, I shouldn't say they're beating everybody, but they're still incredibly competitive, way above what they should be. I think Mosley is a great coach. Either that or those guys just love playing together. And I don't know. I don't know what it is, but they've got something going on there, which is really cool.
For sure. It's wild. Sorry. It's crazy to see. I feel like you rarely see the kind of runs the Magic are having with injuries with any other NBA team. Like you get a couple wins here and there and you're like, oh, that's sweet. But the Magic are just kind of like, we're going to win no matter what. So just, like everyone buckle up and enjoy it. And you're like, all right, I guess we're here.
Yeah. So the one game that I would look at as maybe a potential sort of a trap game in this one would be the Hawks. So number one, that's the last game before they head out west for a road trip. So they're probably thinking about travel. They're thinking about going to bed so they can get on a plane. And the Hawks, you cannot fall asleep against them because Trae Young is having an incredible year passing the ball, particularly. He finally has some guys around him who will knock down shots. Jalen Johnson is a beast. That dude is a legitimate star, and nobody saw it coming except probably the Hawks front office and maybe some Hawks fans who I could talk to here in Atlanta. But he was not being used the right way, and he is a really, really good player for them. DeAndre Hunter is another one who is now, I think, probably overtaking Peyton Pritchard for sixth man of the year. And Pritchard, I actually should have mentioned this before. Pritchard has had some pretty shaky shot selection recently, and I don't know if the whole sixth man of the year thing is getting to his head, or if he's just feeling a little bit, throwing up heat checks. I'm not sure. I don't love what I've seen there recently. But like I said, so just going back to the Hawks, like that's a game they definitely have to lock in for if they want to win. And if they are 3-0 in those first three games, I would expect them to really need to turn it on for that one, because they're going to need it against Atlanta.
Yep. No, I totally see where you're coming from, especially with the next game, on our road trip being the Warriors. I feel like since 2022, we've definitely – I feel like Celtics and even Warriors fans, they kind of like that matchup. It's kind of fun, since the finals, something fresh. And it's definitely one that we could easily overlook the Hawks, and at home. Like, you're just kind of like, it's a Saturday night, you fly out in the morning, like you said, and then you're playing again Monday evening. And so you're just kind of like, we just got to get through this. It'll be interesting, especially because I feel like it was last season, right, where we had the Hawks came back with their biggest deficit ever to beat us in Atlanta. And it was just kind of like one of those games, again, that we shouldn't have lost. And it was just like, oh, you guys are killing me, like, at the end of the game. So hopefully they buckle it down, because I think if they go 4-0 over that home stretch, I think I will be singing a little bit more of their praises and being like, hey, maybe we are going to be able to figure this out. Because if we go 3-1, like, that happens, but a 2-2 split over the next four, I think I'll be like, are we fraud, or are we a squad? Like, what are we gonna do from here on out?
And if that does happen, I guess the question would be, what do you do? And I think my answer to that would be, number one, I don't think they ever should have moved on from Lonnie Walker. Like, they need bench scoring, and they allowed him to just walk away. He wasn't going to play in Maine. He's too good for that. And I really think that they could use him, and I would love to see a reunion with him. Outside of that, do you have any, or if you have thoughts on that, please feel free. But outside of that, do you have any other ideas on what you could do if things continue to slide? Are you looking at making a trade? Are you looking at maybe getting somebody in the buyout market after the deadline? Like, what would be your recommended strategy?
I think it's hard, because we've seen, I think, kind of like we talked about a little bit, like this is primarily like all the same people that came, with our run last year. So we know that they've been able to win a championship. And so it sucks thinking about, like, who do we have to switch out to try and, make another run. But I feel like it's such a hard market right now to try and find someone to fix it. I feel like if we were going to try to find someone, I feel like Lonnie Walker would honestly be our best, because he's already been there. The boys know him, and like it would be something I feel like that would help bring a lot of bench points. Hoping it doesn't get to that point, obviously, but I think I have to think about it more, just because I have that almost blind bleed green hope where I'm like, I just hope everyone figures it out and that we can keep the boys together and then run another one. But right now it's not looking terribly hot if we don't make some changes, if stuff doesn't change, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's plan A. I guess we can address plan B, cross that bridge when we come to it. If it starts to slide, then I think you have to start having some discussions. I'm not talking about shipping anybody out. I don't want to make this sound like I'm talking about trading Jaylen Brown, because that's what people on Twitter will say. Oh, we should get rid of him because he only scored 14 points in one game. Like, stop.
No, so bad.
But there are things you can do to sort of just tweak it a little bit and make some adjustments and get things back on track. And I trust Brad Stevens as a GM. I trust I trust Joe Mazzulla as a head coach. Like, I don't think that they're in trouble, so to speak. But
No.
I think it's fair to say there are more concerns this year than there were last year.
Yes.
Because last year was just so dominant. And this year, you're seeing what happens when, as we talked about, everybody's gunning for you. So I think at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I feel like if we can come to terms, if they can come to terms with like that, we have that target on our back, and that from like there aren't going to be any gimme games, like from here on out. Like no matter what, we're gonna every team is going to give us their best shot, because even if they have 8 wins, like you have if I'm not mistaken, that's what both the Pelicans and the Raptors are at. You want to make that 9th win against the reigning champ to be like we beat, because it's just a nice little like feeling to be like we beat the champ. And so I think they just need to, calm down a little bit and get back to the roots of Celtics basketball and playing that unselfish team ball. And I think we can do it, and that we can come back, and hopefully I'm not mistaken. So I'm gonna, like you said, I have full trust, obviously, in Brad Stevens and in Joe Mazzulla. They'll be able to figure it out, and I just hope that they prove me right.
Yeah, I do too, 100%. Okay, so this has been awesome. I mean, I feel like number one, it's good to have you on. Like I said at the start, we're pumped to kind of get things back in full swing, and I know that we will obviously have plenty to talk about in the coming weeks as the season rolls along. But unless there's anything else that you kind of wanted to hit on, we'll pretty much just wrap it up and get out of here. So for myself and for Aullie, we will catch you guys next time.
Perfect.
Ends tonight here. It's over. Time to say it again, Boston. Anything's possible. Banner number 18 has been secured. The Celtics are NBA champions.